Hello there, welcome back to the Chap's Guide. My name is Ash and I am your host on this journey through men's style, self-development and personal grooming. Now today I'm going to talk about quite a niche but important element of any gentleman's attire. The little details, the features of your clothing is what actually gives it interest and charisma. And I've received a question from a viewer, a patron in fact, which really made me delve a little deeper into the smallest detail of my jackets and clothing. And Felipe has asked me here, what are your thoughts on different styles of lapels? I have been increasingly interested in peak lapels, even for blazers and separate jackets. However, it's hard finding jackets with that type of lapel which are not dinner jackets. So what are my thoughts in that regard? Well, when it comes to setting the aesthetic tone of your clothing, there are a few elements which are perhaps more visually obvious than the lapels. Now, the jacket I'm wearing right now, unusually for a single-breasted jacket, has a peak lapel. And the other type of lapel mentioned, the notch lapel, they have kind of vied for our attention over the years in the clothing in which men tend to buy. However, they've both got their place, even though they're increasingly interchangeable in the modern world. So I think we'll just delve into the history of both the lapels, and then I'll give you my opinion on which I think is the most practical route to go down in this modern era. Now, shall we start with the peak lapel, as I'm wearing a jacket with peak lapels. And they can trace their history right back to the beginning of the lapel. Now, the lapel, of course, is something which came into being, as is often the case, by somewhat accident. Because originally, gentlemen in their finery would have jackets which were buttoned right up to the collar. And of course, in their sort of more casual, less formal moments, gentlemen would leave the first upper levels of their buttons unfastened, and thus they would flap open, and in essence what we had was the creation of a lapel, which of course plays such a prominent part in our clothing in this modern era. Now, the peak lapel originally found status with frock coats, tailcoats and the more formal elements of menswear, and that's kind of where they stayed for quite a long time. In the early 20th century, peak lapels became very highly associated with double-breasted men's coats, which were often worn by the higher echelons of society, the likes of royalty and people of that nature. So the peak lapel really found itself ensconced with these higher level of clothing. Now, today you'll typically find peak lapels on double-breasted jackets, but also on dinner jackets or tuxedos and the most formal elements of men's clothing. It's where it's always been and where it remains today. However, they are creeping more so into the general world of men's attire, as I'm displaying now. I mean, this is just a linen blend summer blazer that I'm wearing, but it has a peak lapel. So they are creeping into general wear, particularly, of course, as we see made-to-measure clothing now being far more accessible to people through the internet. So you can stipulate exactly what you want on the garments that you buy. You can have a notch lapel or a peak lapel just by ticking the box before they create that garment for you. So what are the merits of the good old peak lapel? Well, basically it's the most formal and elegant. The upward angles of the lapel points upwards towards the shoulder, and it gives a more sophisticated look. At the same time, it enhances the look of a man's physique. Because that upward angle points towards the shoulder, it tends to give the appearance of height, and it broadens the shoulders in just natural relief in appearance as you look at them, giving that more elegant and perhaps more commanding silhouette. Now, of course, many tailors use this to their advantage when creating their signature looks. The one which obviously springs to mind for me is Chittleborough and Morgan of Savile Row. They often use quite wide peak lapels, even with single-breasted garments, to give this almost superhero, broad-chested, sort of broad-shouldered appearance to the way the suits are cut. And they're very famous for that. So the peak lapel can be employed to give an absolute certain leaning to the way that one's garment favours the physique, which is very attractive to many. And the final merit for the peak lapel is where it all began, for your most formal clothing. So if you're buying a dinner jacket, if it doesn't have a shawl lapel on it, it should have a peak lapel. And of course, if you're going to very formal events, like investitures at Buckingham Palace, maybe formal dining evenings where a director coat or court attire is required, almost certainly they will have a peak lapel. So that's where its heritage sits, and I think that's where it remains. However, if you want to make a statement in your clothing, of course, and you're going down the made-to-measure route, or maybe even bespoke, or even buying in Marks and Spencer's, where my jacket came from, if you see the peak lapel, it is that little bit different, which will stand aside from perhaps the more common denominator, which is the notch lapel. Now, the notch lapel is characterized, as its name suggests, with a small cutout or notch where the collar meets the lapel. And originally, it was associated with sporting jackets and jackets of a less formal nature. However, in the modern era, and as far back as I can remember, the notch lapel has been the standard for most men's single-breasted lounge suits. And it's what you will typically find on blazers, lounge suits and sports jackets. It's less formal, but it also has a sort of rakish charm to it as well. So not to be discounted, even though it's the most commonly seen lapel type that you'll encounter on men's clothing. Now, the merits of the notch lapel are probably exactly as you would imagine. It's classic and it's versatile. Its simple nature means that it goes with pretty much every style of clothing. You'll find it with all sorts of patterns, materials, be it tweed or even silk blend suits. It seems to fit in with everything because its sort of understated nature means that it's ideal for everything from formal clothing to semi-formal. Even if you wear a tweed jacket with jeans, it can be employed in the casual setting as well. So in the notch lapel, because it's not quite as fancy, shall we say, as the peak lapel, means it's much more employable in a man's wardrobe. So really, to answer Felipe's question, choosing your lapel type will very much come down to how you intend to employ the garment that the lapel sits upon. Whether you're looking at very formal attire, whether you're looking to make a statement, or whether you want to employ the architectural features of the peak lapel to add the impression of height and broadness to one shoulder, which I say is very admirably employed in maybe the Chittleborough and Morgan designs, which you see coming from Savile Row, but you'll also find that style appearing in department stores, off the rack, like the garments I'm wearing. But now you understand the difference between peak and notch lapels, you can perhaps make a better decision yourself. And maybe if you're having a made-to-measure garment and you get those two boxes, what choice do you want? Peak lapel or notch lapel? Now you can tick the box with confidence and knowledge as to what that garment is going to do for you and how it's going to make you look. So there we go. I hope you enjoyed this little gallop through the world of men's lapel styles. If you have, click the like button. If you want to see more, subscribe. And be like Felipe and ask me a question. Just drop it into the comments section or even send me an email. It would be my pleasure to assist you on your journey to Chap Nirvana. And you can support the channel by buying me a coffee, one-off thing, or become a patron, just like Felipe. My patrons get additional videos from me each week, and we also have something of a personal relationship because, in essence, they are my extended family. And if you'd like to find out how to become involved with that, it's all in the show notes below. So until the next time, take care. Wear your lapels with the confidence which comes from the knowledge of knowing what they are all about. And I will see you again very soon.